I will just take it from here about what you said. I think when you instill fear, and after fear becomes also hatred in people's mind, then we as humans, as the way I see and the way we see the whole past year, is changing the way that people can think critically and analyze the situation. So unfortunately, it seems that history is repeating itself time and again, and we can see lack of education, but also using a very vicious tactics to pull people to wherever the regime or the so-called governments wants to take them. You spoke about the media, the mainstream media. I'm not sure there is a media anymore, mainstream media. I think the real media is what we are doing here. It's the open media.
Let me ask you just one question. Do you have the feeling, this is what some of the people who we spoke to today said, Renate Holzeisen, for example, do you have the feeling that more and more people are turning away from the mainstream media when they're looking for real information and trying to get this real information from other sources?
Yes, I believe so. But then again, I'm saying people that have been instilled with fear, people that are following the normal trend of just getting the information from the newspaper, and if it's in the newspaper, so obviously it's true, then it's harder for people to wake up. But as we talked yesterday, and we reminded this famous saying that refers to Abraham Lincoln, which probably is not, he was not the one to say it, but it doesn't really matter who is the one to have the copyright. But you can fool most of the people all the time, or some of the people all the time, or all the people some of the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. And now what we see is that there is something going on for a long time. So as long as time is passing, more people are waking up, because you cannot fool all of them, as the saying goes. So we'll go back to the question about the media, the mainstream or so-called media. This is not a media, this is a propaganda channels, and normally you can see that these are big groups, like we see cooperation in everywhere, in economics, in health, in communication, and they are being controlled by a lot of money. And instead of being what we are calling the fourth pillar of democracy, critical channels for information that ask the right questions, bring different opinions to the table, we see what I call a propaganda, because we see, and definitely in Israel, because I can speak about Israel maybe more than any other place in the world, because I'm connected to what's going on over there. Obviously, there is an agenda, and that agenda is being pushed over the population, and unfortunately with a lot of success in the state of Israel. And it's kind of, I would say, symbolic that I'm here in Germany getting help of people like you guys and all over the world that are saying giving different information and having a different conversation, when in Israel, which is supposed to be, I think, the leader because of our history of freedom of speech and critical thinking, it became, I feel, and I represent many people in Israel right now that feels that the country, in terms of consciousness, is being hijacked, and that people are being fooled and maneuvered to believe that they are leading the world. People are so happy with the vaccination. They're almost there, getting out of this corona thing. It's just around the corner, and this is the lie that they are perpetuating to them, and many people are buying it. And it's very sad that this has happened in this country, when they don't know that in many other countries they're looking at Israel and they say, what? How come in France, 60 million people, almost nobody is rushing for vaccination? Same goes in Germany. Same goes in other countries. And some people, you know, when I talk to my close people, say, oh, maybe they don't have the vaccination. These countries are more wealthy than ours. If that was something that the governments or regimes would want to promote, they could promote it. That's not a problem for them. I think the public opinion is a little bit different over there, and I have a lot of optimism that what's going on in Europe, in the States it's a big question mark, but in Europe will be the first to be the game changer for where we're heading forward, and I believe it's not getting our life back. We should go to a much better place than we were before, because where we were before, that was the ground to where we are now.
Now, the irony is that you're an Israeli. This country is the country that is responsible for 6 million people's deaths. And the irony is that you're here now, and we're talking about how we are worried, us here are worried, that something very similar to what happened back then is happening again in your country with your people, with a lot of people being completely unaware of the dangers of these vaccinations.
Totally. I would say that it's not the country of Israel is not responsible, but the country of Israel was founded on the basis of what happened in the Holocaust. About 6 million people died of our nation, which was about 1/3. And that basically we finally managed to get a small piece of land and build up and what we call a democratic and Jewish, actually Jewish and democratic society. So this is the principles of our state being established for. And somebody told me yesterday, a friend of mine, we talked about it, and he said, you know, it's the same. Once again, people of Israel are getting something in a majority, in a massive scale from a Germany company. Now, I was here saying kind of a joke, but it's really because Pfizer is a German company. People don't know. However,
is it German or is BioNTech is German? Pfizer is, I think they're American or British.
So yeah, but it's like German. It's coming from Germany. At least that's how we perceive it. However, this is being pushed by our own regime, our own leaders, our own propaganda, unfortunately, channels that brings people to a very dangerous belief. I ask people, why do you vaccinate yourself? Why do you go to vaccinate? And of course, there are two reasons could be for that. One of them would be that people are scared from corona. So they say we have to make a decision between one bad thing to another bad thing. So which is worse, getting the corona and have the risks around it, which is, by the way, easy to check. And when you see all the data and the tables that making the comparison between past years and now, then you see there is no big change. But the claim from some people will say, yeah, because we took some extreme measures. And for that, my answer is always the same. Fortunately enough, we have Sweden. We have other countries as well, but Sweden is one of the most transparent, advanced, modern country that you can rely on the information we're getting from there. And somebody sent me from a doctor's group that I'm connected with the table from the past few years, the same table that you've been looking here. Actually, the only one that we should be focusing, which is mortality, because on mortality, you cannot have, it doesn't make a difference from what. It's total mortality. And if you have a pandemic and if you have a problem, even if it's a seasonal flu that is stronger than other years, you will see a correlation with the death rates. There is no other way. That's how it is in our nature. And I could see that they had 2020 on Sweden, they had an increase of mortality, but that increase of mortality is equal than what they had in 2015. And when you look at the years between, yes, there is it's a lower rate, but it's not a huge difference. And this country didn't have 1 day of lockdown, didn't have 1 day of closing the schools, and didn't have even 1 day with masks requirement from the population. So you see pictures, videos that are coming up from Sweden every day almost, when people want to show the rest of the world that they are going with the public transportation close to each other, they're going with the elevators close to each other. Yes, they said Andres Tegnell is the chief over there in health administration, and I think he's very brave. Very professional as well.
He's under a lot of pressure as well.
Totally. But he's a strong man and he cares for his people.
Yeah.
And when
he says, "You're not going to fuck me again," because that's what he felt they did to him with the swine flu. He learned his lesson.
Okay.
He remembers how he was being lied to. So he's not going to have that happen to his country again.
Exactly. And there are a lot of fake news here, and every few months I see something about Sweden that they're going back, they're making a U-turn, blah, blah, blah. This is not true. And,
good to hear.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear what he said at the beginning, because, again, people, because of fear, they just don't open their ears, they just don't listen. He said something very basic, very logical. He said the healthcare system is for the people, and it's not vice versa. So all these countries, like yours, like mine, are saying, "Oh, come on, we don't want to get to the point that doctors will have to choose who they treat and who is not. They're not treating, and it's like they're going to have so many people, and it's going to be overload, and we're going to have to open hospitals from the temporary hospitals via the army." And he says the same, but in the opposite way. He said, first, we will have our healthcare system being overcapacity. Then we'll call to the army and get another temporary hospitals. And then if we cannot manage that, we will see what kind of other measure needed. But what happened in most countries besides Sweden is the opposite. They say, because of this claim, which is kind of noble, right? Because they want to save the doctors from making such a harsh decision. So I think being a lawyer and dealing with what I'm dealing, it's really hard. So if you don't want to do it, don't get this profession. And exactly with doctors, if you don't want to face a hard decision, don't practice this profession. But if you are practicing this profession, well, first of all, you have to serve the people. The people don't have to be hurt by anything or changing their lives by anything because of this fear that something will happen. Let's see if it happens or not. I mean, we can see in Sweden, the skies didn't fall. So that's a fact.
Yeah.
So that's an answer for everybody that says, "Oh, no, because of the lockdowns, because of the masks, because of whatever, now it would have been much worse." So here is a country doesn't do it, and it's not much worse. Same goes with Belarus, same goes with Egypt, same goes with other countries.
Finland, other countries, Thailand,
Tanzania. There are many countries that are not being, you don't hear about them because, again, the media doesn't want people to know what's going on. They want people to believe and to follow an agenda.
Yeah. Very interesting.
What I think is also the case is that, so far with this illusion of democracy that we've maybe had before, you still have the expectation, and that's what people, you look at various news outlets and you hear a little bit of a different opinion here and there, but it's basically the same. The main information is all the same, dangerous and all this, what we just said. But since I think this is, it's not that you come like fresh, new to a situation like this, but you come with all this heritage of kind of expecting that you still have some sort of objectivity. And I think that's also what makes it really difficult for people to understand that this is so, for whatever reason, we don't have to go into detail, but this is just this same stuff that's blown onto you, and then you think, oh, this must be true if everyone says it.
Yeah.
That's if it's raining and like it says in the news, okay, it's raining, then it might really be true. That's I think that's the problem. You're in an illusion still that
But
clings with you.
it always takes us back to the explanation that Professor Lind gave us, that people haven't learned to use their brains and think.
Yeah.
It is easier because of the failures of the last 20 years in our educational system, and I know it's about as long, probably longer, that this same failure happened in the United States, because I have first-hand experience with some of it. Because of these failures, people simply accept obvious lies, like the one that he was alluding to. He was reading to us a statistic from a nursing home where they had dozens and dozens and dozens of tests, which boiled down to 18 positive cases, which of course they explain, they tell us to be infections, but 18 positive cases. But because they had done so many tests, they made 126 cases out of this. A perfect lie, but people simply believed it. Why is it that Israel obviously got the first truckloads of vaccines when the rest of the world was still hoping that they would get it? Why is that?
Israel has an agreement with Pfizer, I think also with Moderna. The information is not so clear because the government only reveals whatever. People told me to be accurate and say regime, not the government. Government is working for you. Regime may be working against you, so I will use regime. But the regime is definitely... So they have they closed all the information, all the discussions under confidentiality for 30 years. Now, normally you do it when you have you don't want anything to leak out because you have an enemy that can read what was the basis for this decision and that decision to do or avoid something.
Yeah.
But as far as I understand, the virus didn't learn how to read yet, the virus. So until that happens, we can all be safe that the government, regime, will be transparent with us. So we don't know exactly what happened. I know that after a lot of pressure this week or just lately, they did reveal some of the stuff about the contract that they've made with those companies, but not all of it. And it seems that they accepted, first of all, no liability for the manufacturer, which it's a problematic issue. People like me that deals with vaccines, injuries, and I'm sorry about also some medical tyranny, are involved for years and know the consequences, like Dale Bigtree saying and Kennedy, Robert Kennedy Jr. about the non-liability of the vaccine manufacturers, which is one of the big sin of all, because they don't have the drive to make safe products. So Israel already gave up the liability for these products' safety. It is political. It's only political. We don't have
Same here.
We don't have any professionals that they can say that they recommend the government, definitely when it was not even approved by the FDA, because those contracts were signed a few months ago already. That they could say, yes, we should do it. I mean, how can you say professionally we should use that thing when there are two main facts? One of the facts, it's a basis principle that anything that is not proving, any chemicals that you insert to people's body, unless it's proving safe, it has to be considered as dangerous. That's a principle. It always has been like that. That's why it takes so many years to approve everything with the FDA. Vaccine also have a fast track, And this particular vaccine has a very, very fast track, which got the approval at the end after a lot of pressure, political pressure, with opposition within the board of the FDA, and it's very limited. And it's also still considered as a trial. So in Israel, unfortunately, we are in the middle of a trial, of an experiment with human beings. And another aspect to it is the mortality rate. Again, this virus is killing about less than 0.5% of the people that get it. So why would you rush and vaccinate majority of people? They're talking about vaccinate now children in Israel, pregnant women in Israel. And you know what they're basing that? And I've read some answers from professionals, like official health experts from the regime. They're saying, we don't have data that shows that this is dangerous for them, so obviously it should be okay. This is the opposite of the principle of how the medicine standards are worked, at least worked until lately.
It may have something to do with the fact that the push into Israel may have something to do with the fact that Pfizer has access to long-term medical records of people in Israel. Have you heard about this?
You're talking about that they had it, or they're going to have it from now on?
They're going to have it from now on.
Of course. We know for sure that the government agreed that they will send the data, at least the mass data, which means that not necessarily with the person's name, but generally about what's going on, adverse reaction, whatever, to these companies. And on a first glance, it seems to be like a good idea, because if you already make an experiment, whether it's good to do it or not, at least get the right information from it. However, that has to be under a consent. We know after World War II, and again, it's symbolic, we're talking about it here in the table in Berlin, we had the Nuremberg trials. The Nuremberg trials were trials about crimes against humanity. That's the worst that you can be tried for, a person could be tried for. And then there was a realization, and then that we need to have a different rules, set of rules that we didn't have before. And I'm emphasizing this because I have a point at the end. So our fathers and grandfathers, they made a change in the doctrine, and they said now we have a Nuremberg Code, which is dealing about anything of medical treatment, and in particular about experiments. Then we had a progression with that, which calls the Helsinki Declaration. Again, making those things established, and then all different countries started to adopt these principles and got them into their own legal system. So we, for instance, in Israel, we have a law for the protection of a patient. Or the rights of the patients, and one of the principles in there is the informed consent. So you have to give a consent, and I always explain to people, consent means that you cannot consent if you don't want to. Otherwise, there is no meaning for consent. It's either I want or I don't want, and it has to be informed, and there are details what it has to be informed. But there's another principle, the principle of privacy. There can never be a real consent if it's not private. That's why we have private elections. It's confidential, because if I'm going to vote and people knows what I'm doing, then it will affect the way, because I can be apprised or I can be denied by my friends. But if nobody knows, then it's private. I can make an independent decision. So those principles are under a very heavy attack. And in Israel, they're making this trial, this experiment on the population. Nobody gets an informed consent. Nobody gets the extra information that you have to give in a trial, in an experiment. You have to explain also the nature of this experimental procedure, which is, by the way, what the FDA approved under an experimental phase, not just regular approval. And this affects people's decision. But I want to end with that I'm getting all day long, even when I was here, and I'm getting people approaching me. It becomes, unfortunately, the officials and the regime are trying to establish a new norm, not by law, by conduct.
Yes.
So now, for instance, in the army, because the people are young, they're over 18, they have a sovereignty to make their own decisions, so the parents cannot interfere, and that's okay. But they have a lot of peer pressure, definitely in that group of age.
Same here in Germany.
And
with the army and other...
And now it's coming to school. Next week they want to start into school. Now again, the people that can be hurt, according to the information that we have, are the elderly.
Yeah.
Why would we have to vaccinate everybody else? And also create a norm that people can ask you, are you vaccinated? Where are you going to be vaccinated? People got letters that they cannot go back to work if they are not showing vaccination. Now when they come to me and ask me for help, and they said maybe I should ask them that they will take responsibility, and I'm saying no. You have to tell them this is none of your business what I do and what I don't do, and this is a violation or attempt for violation of my privacy, which has a criminal side as well. You can go to the police and follow or complain. But it's not about that. It's just we have to understand where this shift is taking society. They want to take us back before the war. They want to take us back before the time that we have developed all this new all these concepts of human rights and privacy, which built a glue for a democratic society. So it's not going to be a democratic society anymore.
They want to get rid of it.
If we're going to get rid of it, and the top of, I would say, on the edge of where it can go, and they already talk about it seriously in Israel, is what they call the green passport, which happily enough, it seems to be rejected already by the European countries. But in Israel, people believe that they could not even go and travel the world without it, which is probably not going to happen. And also it will have classes within the population. And this is in the state of Israel. So I want to mention also one thing on a personal level. My grandfathers from both sides were Holocaust survivors. And from my father's side, my grandfather, which I knew very well and I loved him deeply, he was an officer in the Red Army, and he was injured 3 times during the war, and 3 times came back, because back then it was a different story how it works. And I grew up on those stories. And I grew up on the basis that we are now having our own country, that we're not being ruled by people outside, but unfortunately there is no immunity. If we're already talking about vaccine, there is no immunity from people to be hijacked by bad guys. It might happen to one nation or another. There is a history, but no one is immune. And this year, unfortunately, I'm saying it it makes me very sad that my country represents now how a society can be hijacked by bad guys.